Like, share and subscribe because it is free. My name is Kethvar of the Third Talon, veteran of 43 worlds, survivor of the Kepler campaigns. The plasma burns across my left carapace are permanent reminders of the Vextai crystal bombardment at Proxima 7. My cybernetic eyes replaced the originals after a Thane chemical attack on Europa's moon. These scars tell the story of 37 years fighting alongside 12 different species across the galaxy's rim. I stand before this tribunal today because you need to understand what happened when the humans joined our war. You've read the casualty reports. You've seen the tactical analyses. But numbers don't capture what we witnessed. Statistics can't explain why seasoned warriors from the hegemony wake up screaming, not from nightmares of enemy attacks, but from memories of human sacrifice. The Galactic Council classified humans as a Class 7 civilization when they first applied for membership. Standard carbon-based bipeds, average reflexes, limited natural armor, short lifespan. Their technology ranked adequate but unexceptional. Their military doctrine appeared derivative of basic tactical principles taught in academy simulations. We expected them to contribute minimally to the war effort, perhaps serving support roles or garrison duties on secure worlds. How catastrophically wrong we were. The war against the Dominion had raged for 18 cycles when Earth's delegation arrived at Central Command. Admiral Chin stood barely chest-high to most species present, her uniform simple cloth rather than adaptive armor. She possessed no natural weapons, no enhanced physiology, no obvious genetic advantages that marked superior warrior species. When she requested frontline combat assignments for her forces, several delegates laughed. The Thane representative suggested humans might better serve as medical personnel or supply coordinators. Admiral Chen's response haunts me still: "We didn't cross 23 light years to play it safe. Point us toward the hardest fight you've got." The Zephyrian High Command assigned the Terran 7th Shock Regiment to our sector, expecting them to learn proper military protocol through observation. We assumed they would adapt to established galactic military doctrine within standard integration timeframes. Defensive positioning, calculated risk assessment, strategic resource preservation, acceptable loss parameters, fundamental principles every civilized species understood instinctively. First contact with human tactical thinking shattered every assumption we held about warfare. During preliminary briefings, their Lieutenant Colonel Sanders questioned standard operating procedures with disturbing frequency. When informed that positions should be abandoned if casualty rates exceeded 15%, he asked why. When shown proper retreat protocols for overwhelming enemy force ratios, he requested clarification on what constituted overwhelming. When briefed on equipment preservation priorities, he wondered aloud why material assets ranked higher than territorial objectives. His questions revealed thinking patterns that defied evolutionary logic. Every known species possessed survival instincts that prioritized individual and unit preservation. Natural selection demanded organisms capable of recognizing feudal situations and withdrawing to fight another day. Humans appeared to lack this fundamental programming. The first joint operation occurred 3 rotations later at Kepler 442b, a mining colony under siege by Dominion forces. Routine defensive assignment, textbook positioning, by-the-numbers extraction of non-combatants. We expected the humans to observe, learn, and contribute minimally while gaining experience. Instead, they taught us that everything we knew about warfare was incomplete. They showed us what happens when a species views death not as failure, but as acceptable cost for mission success. They demonstrated that tactical impossibility becomes routine when survival instinct takes second priority to protecting others. Honored Council, I have fought beside the galaxy's finest warriors. I have witnessed courage, skill, and determination across dozens of species and hundreds of battles. But nothing prepared us for humanity's approach to combat. Nothing could have warned us what they consider normal operating procedure. What follows is my testimony about the day we learned that humans don't just fight wars, they redefine what warfare means. The Kepler 442b mining facility housed 8,000 civilian workers when Dominion forces established orbital blockade. Standard siege protocols dictated immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel, establishment of defensive perimeters at optimal choke points, and gradual withdrawal toward extraction zones if enemy pressure exceeded sustainable thresholds. Simple mathematics guided every decision: preserve maximum forces for future engagements while minimizing material losses. Lieutenant Colonel Sanders received his briefing with typical human intensity, those pale eyes studying tactical displays with unsettling focus. When our Zephyrian commanders outlined withdrawal contingencies, he interrupted with a question that changed everything. What about the civilians? Evacuation transport capacity limits rescue operations to priority personnel, Commander Vexhai explained. Mining technicians and support staff fall below tactical evacuation thresholds. Sanders stared at the projection showing 8,000 red dots representing doomed workers. You're writing off 6,000 people because they're not important enough? They are acceptable losses under standard. There are no acceptable losses. Sanders turned toward his human officers. Major Rodriguez, defensive positions around the civilian quarters. Captain Williams, fortify the landing bays. Lieutenant Park, get those miners organized into work details. We're not leaving anybody behind. What happened next defied every principle of military science I'd learned across 4 decades of warfare. The humans established defensive positions not at tactically superior locations, but at points that maximized civilian protection. They sacrificed strategic advantages to maintain shorter evacuation routes. They converted mining equipment into improvised weapons rather than preserving valuable military assets. Private Martinez continued fighting with a compound fracture in his left leg, using his rifle as a makeshift crutch while directing covering fire. When ordered to report for medical evacuation, he refused, stating that his position commanded essential sight lines. He fought for 6 hours on a shattered limb, never abandoning his post until the last civilian transport cleared the landing zone. Sergeant Chen spent 18 hours jury-rigging explosives from mining charges, creating demolition traps throughout the facility's lower levels. She worked without sleep, without relief, converting industrial equipment into military assets through pure determination and impossible innovation. When Dominion forces breached the outer perimeter, her improvised explosives bought crucial time for evacuation operations. Captain Williams established medical stations in areas our tactical computers designated as indefensible. When asked why he positioned aid stations in locations certain to face enemy assault, he explained that wounded personnel required immediate treatment regardless of strategic disadvantages. He treated 47 casualties under direct fire, refusing to relocate to safer positions because moving wounded soldiers would increase fatality rates. The entire human regiment displayed identical disregard for personal safety when civilian lives hung in balance. They fought not to win, but to ensure others could escape. They turned routine evacuation into total commitment, transforming defensive action into something approaching religious fervor. Lieutenant Parker led a flanking maneuver through radiation zones that should have killed his entire squad within minutes. Their environmental suits weren't rated for those exposure levels, but Parker calculated that temporary radiation poisoning was acceptable if it allowed them to strike Dominion artillery positions. His team spent 4 hours in lethal radiation, destroying enemy gun emplacements that threatened evacuation ships. By the time extraction vessels arrived, human casualties exceeded 60%. Standard military doctrine would classify such losses as catastrophic failure requiring immediate investigation and command restructuring. But every single civilian survived. 8,000 non-combatants reached safety because 600 humans decided their lives mattered more than tactical efficiency. That's when I understood we'd encountered something unprecedented in galactic warfare. A species that fought harder when odds grew worse, that viewed impossible missions as standard operating procedure, that treated sacrifice not as last resort but as primary tactical option. The humans hadn't just participated in a defensive action. They had redefined what defense meant. Haven Station represented the last fortress between Dominion fleets and the core worlds housing 3 billion refugees. Built into an asteroid, the station commanded the only navigable hyperspace route through the Helix Nebula. Military strategists calculated that holding Haven for 72 hours would allow evacuation fleets to reach secure sectors. Standard defensive doctrine called for gradual withdrawal through prepared positions, buying maximum time while preserving forces for future operations. The humans volunteered to hold the station alone. Commander Rodriguez assumed command with 400 Marines against 12,000 incoming Dominion assault troops. No reinforcements possible. No evacuation planned. When offered the option to withdraw before the siege began, Rodriguez transmitted a response that still haunts military communications. Haven Station is the line. We hold it or everyone behind us dies. Send us more ammunition, not exit strategies. What I witnessed during those 72 hours changed my understanding of what intelligent species could become when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. The humans didn't just fight desperately, they transformed into something that defied natural law. Marines welded themselves into corridor junctions, creating unbreachable human barriers. Corporal Jackson sealed himself behind a bulkhead door with 2 heavy weapons, holding a critical intersection for 18 hours. When the door finally gave way, Dominion forces found him still firing despite massive blood loss, his weapon fused to his hands by his own body heat. He had killed 400 enemies from that single position. Corpsman Williams performed emergency surgery on himself to remove shrapnel from his abdomen, then continued treating wounded soldiers while his own organs were exposed. He worked for 6 hours with his intestines held in place by medical tape, saving 14 lives before finally collapsing. When we recovered his body, his surgical tools were still clutched in hands that rigor mortis had locked in position. The station's reactor required manual detonation to prevent Dominion capture. Commander Rodriguez personally descended to the core chamber, knowing the radiation would kill her before she could complete the sequence. Her final transmission reached us as she initiated the overload. Tell them we held the line. Tell them Haven remembers everyone we're dying for. The reactor explosion vaporized the station's central section and 16 Dominion assault ships, but the humans had prepared for even this. They had distributed explosives throughout the remaining structure, turning every corridor into a trap, every room into a weapon. The station didn't just explode, it became a constellation of destruction that took half the Dominion fleet with it. What terrified me wasn't the violence or the destruction. It was the methodical way humans approached their own deaths. They planned their sacrifices with the same precision other species used for survival strategies. They calculated casualty rates not to minimize losses, but to maximize damage to enemies. They transformed death from failure into tactical advantage. Sergeant Martinez recorded personal messages for his family while setting demolition charges, calmly explaining his love for them between instructions for delayed detonation sequences. Private Kim composed poetry while preparing chemical weapons from cleaning supplies, creating art about sacrifice while literally preparing to die for strangers she'd never meet. The nightmares don't come from watching humans fight. They come from watching humans choose death with such peaceful determination that it seemed natural, even beautiful. No species should face extinction with such grace. No intelligence should calculate their own destruction with such mathematical precision. Haven Station held for 76 hours. 4 days longer than deemed possible. Long enough for every refugee fleet to reach safety. The humans didn't just complete their mission. They exceeded it while knowing from the beginning that success meant their deaths. The refugee fleets reached safety because 400 humans decided their lives were worth trading for 3 billion strangers. Word of Haven Station spread through every military command, every species, every warrior culture across the galaxy. Veterans who had never met humans began requesting transfers to Terran-integrated units. The effect was immediate and unprecedented. Zephyrian assault doctrine underwent complete revision. Our traditional hit-and-fade tactics evolved to include sustained defensive positions when civilian populations required protection. The concept of acceptable losses disappeared from our military vocabulary, replaced by human-inspired determination to save everyone possible. Survival instincts that had governed our species for millennia suddenly seemed insufficient. The Thane collective abandoned their centuries-old philosophy of strategic withdrawal. Their new combat manuals include sections titled Final Stand Protocols and mission completion through ultimate sacrifice. Warriors who once prided themselves on living to fight another day now volunteer for suicide missions with disturbing enthusiasm. The humans had infected them with something beyond tactical innovation. They had introduced the concept that some objectives justify certain death. Mentor-Cree academies now teach courses on human combat psychology and sacrifice-based strategic planning. Their most brilliant tactical minds study human battle recordings not for conventional military lessons, but to understand how to inspire soldiers to fight beyond the point where survival becomes impossible. They've learned that humans don't just ignore their self-preservation instincts. They actively override them when others need protection. My own transformation began immediately after Haven Station. The nightmares weren't about dying in combat. Every soldier accepts that possibility. They were about living while others died for causes I hadn't fully understood. Human sacrifice had revealed the selfishness inherent in standard military thinking. We fought to survive, to win, to return home. Humans fought so others could have homes to return to. I started volunteering for the most dangerous assignments, not from human recklessness, but from human-inspired purpose. The difference is crucial. Recklessness is random and wasteful. Purpose is calculated and meaningful. Humans taught us that the most logical military decision isn't always about preserving your own forces. Sometimes it's about ensuring your cause survives regardless of personal cost. The war ended not because we defeated the Dominion through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. It ended because human sacrifice had transformed every species in the Alliance. We stopped fighting like individuals trying to survive and started fighting like humans, as parts of something larger than ourselves, something worth dying for. Veterans across 12 species now carry human-inspired scars. Not physical wounds, but psychological transformations that changed how we view duty, sacrifice, and the true meaning of military service. We learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that something else matters more than your fear. Honored Council, you summon me to provide intelligence about human military capabilities for your strategic assessments. You want to understand their weapons, their numbers, their tactical advantages. But you're asking the wrong questions entirely. The humans' greatest weapon isn't their technology or their stubborn refusal to surrender when any sane species would retreat. Their greatest weapon is that they made us remember what we're fighting for. They reminded us that some things are worth more than survival. They taught us that the highest military honor isn't living through the battle. It's ensuring that others can live because of your sacrifice. The humans didn't just join our war, Honored Council. They taught us how to win it by showing us what victory actually means. They transformed every species in this alliance from survivors into protectors. That transformation is their true legacy, and it's why we'll never lose another war that matters.